Hey everybody, so I guess it's time to open up about my awakening. This isn't something that I ever expected to talk about. I think only a handful of people around me even know about what happened. I definitely didn't expect that I would be discussing it with people I don't know, but I guess life has a different path for me. So here we go. Let's just get into it. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a backstory. I was living in BC. I had been with my common law husband for about 10 years. I have 3 kids. I have a child with a heart condition. I went through various different traumas throughout life of various different degrees, as well as I had no idea I was struggling with breast implant illness. I had no idea that my body was sick. So I have a high stress lifestyle, to say the least. And yeah, so one day I went to work. I wasn't feeling good. My body was doing some really weird things. So I went to work, and I had gotten home from work and called my husband at the time to come home because I could tell that something was wrong. Something was extremely wrong in my body. My soul just knew that something was going on and I needed to get to the hospital. So I gave him a call and got him to come home as quick as he could, and he rushed me into the ER. Now I hadn't been feeling good, and my body had been a little, off for about, I don't even know how long. It'd probably been years before this point, but I just didn't recognize the signs and signals of toxicity and stress. So by the time I got into the hospital, I couldn't walk, I couldn't lift my legs. So got into the hospital, they got me into a bed, and they started doing testing on me right away because they actually they thought I had AIDS. They thought I came in and was completely immunodeficient and was suffering from AIDS. So that was the first test that they did on me. And yeah, everything kind of just progressed and got worse. So they ended up running a bunch of tests for me to see what was going on. Couldn't find anything, and they threw me in a back room. At this point, I couldn't lift my legs at all. I couldn't lift them. I was struggling to move. My body was just kind of shutting down. It was going toxic. That's a story for another time that I'll get into later and kind of explain what happened there. But it ended up that it was going toxic. So they put me into a back room with the doctor. They put me in the back room with a doctor. My common law husband was with me at the time. And I should add, the entire time we drove into the hospital, I just had this gut-wrenching feeling that I wasn't going to come back out. I wasn't going to see my kids. I wasn't going to be able to say goodbye to my kids, that I was going to die. I didn't know what was going on, but I knew something was terribly wrong. So the entire time you're driving to the hospital in a situation like that, you kind of reflect on your life a little bit and look at everything and kind of judge where you're at and how happy you are, and just the decisions that you've made and where you're at in life. And I just knew I was extremely unhappy, and I just kept looking at my life and the fact that I wasn't going to see my kids and where I was sitting and just how miserable I was. Our relationship was toxic. It definitely had ran its course. So yeah, we got into the hospital, and as I was laying in the hospital bed, there's a whole bunch of other things that went up to this point, but for the speed of the conversation, I was trying to lift my legs. I was breathing really heavy, trying to lift my legs, just absolutely terrified. And then all of a sudden, I had this shock go from the base of my spine, and it went tunk, 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 like up where the chakras or whatever you believe would have been, into various spots, and it shocked all the way up my spine, and it went all the way to my head and into my brain. And suddenly I started slurring and I started stuttering. The person who was with me at the time, he looked into my eyes, and he said I looked absolutely terrified. I thought I was going to die. I didn't know what was going on. It was absolutely the scariest, most vulnerable moment I have ever had in my entire life. And those shocks went up my spine, and then everything stopped. Suddenly my oxygen saturations dropped. The doctor was getting ready to fly me out to Calgary because they didn't know what was going on with me. They couldn't figure it out. All my tests were coming up inconclusive. So so that happened. Went up to the top of my spine, everything stopped, and then suddenly I was just slurring and stuttering and sitting there. The only thing they gave me was a bag of normal saline, which is important for another part later that I'll explain. But what I can tell is my body was going into toxic shock. It triggered, between the breathing and the pain and the lifting the legs, it ended up triggering this shock up my spine, which the closest thing I can find to what happened to me that day is called a Kundalini awakening. After I got out of the hospital, I researched it like crazy. But anyways, so I ended up that night, they kept me overnight. They didn't fly me out. They kept me overnight for observation. And then the next day I left thinking, I don't know what the fuck just happened, but it's done. Wasn't done. It was not done. So I went home and I literally looked like I went through a war zone. My face was like drooping. My eye was swollen. I couldn't see out of my eye. I just suddenly, and also on top of it, I was awake. Suddenly I was just like conscious. This shock went up my spine, and suddenly I'm sitting here and it was like I was in a dream and I suddenly woke up. And it was the most surreal experience I have ever had in my life. I can't explain it, but it literally threw my life upside down. So I went home thinking that everything was done and trying to figure out what the fuck just happened, and started doing research to look into it. And the closest I could find was it's a Kundalini awakening. Now, other people who have Kundalini awakenings, there's some sort of sexual energy that's connected to it, or there's like a twin flame, something like that. That's not what I had. I didn't experience things in that way. So, but I got home and was completely conscious. I realized everything in my life was false. Everything was fake. I realized everything around me was fake. I realized how unhappy I was, and it literally imploded my entire life. I'm thinking it's done and I can move on and try to figure out what I'm going to do next. And what ended up happening was a few weeks later, I ended up having an episode where my reality just completely came crashing down on me. I ended up seeing something that basically shattered everything I believed within my relationship and within my reality. And it shattered my psyche, and I snapped. I absolutely lost it. I had an episode of just trauma and terror and anger and sadness, and everything just pour out of me in this one instant. And it was just this huge moment of release that I was not expecting, and it was traumatizing as shit. And then following that, I was more conscious again and realized just that I had to make changes. It changed everything. It changed my relationship, it changed my job, it changed my friends, it changed my kids' schooling, it changed where I lived. It absolutely changed everything. Suddenly, when you're awake and conscious, you can't really go back to the life you used to live, especially when it's making you sick in different ways, because you're not dealing with certain traumas and certain emotions. So yeah, I ended up separating from the person that I was with, which ironically caused his awakening. So it was quite the process for us both. And yeah, then I ended up having to dig to find out what was going on, because I had no idea what was going on. So that's when I started to get in, because I was agnostic before this. I knew there was something out there. I didn't do yoga. I wasn't into Kundalini. I didn't know what twin flames were. Didn't know any of this stuff. It was not part of my path. And then all of a sudden it was my path. It's the only thing I could focus on was what happened to me that day, and explain, because the doctors thought I was absolutely insane. So my life turned into discovering what my purpose was, what was going on here, what's going on with my health, what's going on with my mind, getting my mind back. It's almost like it wipes my mind clear. It's the strangest thing. The things that happened to me in the past, I know that they happened, but I don't like feel like they're mine. Like I know they're mine, but it's almost like watching a movie. So I began digging and sorting through all of these things that happened. And on top of it, then I had to deal with breast implant illness that almost killed me in the upcoming months. So, but that's a story for another time. But basically, that's kind of my awakening story. I went into the hospital one day thinking I was going to die, and I left the hospital the next day completely awake to everything that's going on in our world. So, and then following this, quite a few, I think it was a couple years later, I ended up having another situation happen when I was meditating. So I was meditating, listening to music, and I don't know if anybody else has ever had this happen. Let me know, because I'm kind of curious. I had something, I'm assuming my pineal gland snap open because it was calcified. It was, my water was fortified with fluoride when I was a kid and other things. So I had this thing snap open in my brain, and suddenly I felt this warm feeling come down my head and go all over my body. And then I woke up. So in this awakening, I've kind of had a couple things going on. To the best of my knowledge, the only thing that I can connect it to that anybody else has referenced is a Kundalini awakening. I didn't quite have it the same way that they had it. It was quite a bit different. The circumstances were different, as well as the way it produced itself through my body was different. Now, it's changed my entire life. I can't really date. Don't really date because people they don't understand. They haven't had the same experience, and it's something that I can't go back to sleep. So I don't really date. My kids are homeschooled. I treat my body better. My health is better. My focus is always on passion, my passion of dismantling my programming with repairing my mind, repairing my body, and figuring out what's going on here and what I'm supposed to do next. Working a normal 9-to-5 job? No. Getting out to work? Absolutely not. I can't even, it destroys me. So trying to figure out how to work from home while raising my kids, as well as homeschooling them, that's become my life now, and finding people that have had similar experiences, because like I said, I realize that this is going to be happening to a lot of people, and I'm not the only person this is going to be happening to. So anyways, that was my experience with this awakening. I find the deeper I go, the more I expand my consciousness, and the more opens up, and the more I'm learning, and the more I'm discovering, which makes it harder to fit in even more. But I know that other people will be going through this soon as well too. So that is my story of my awakening. There's a lot more that followed that. That's just one little piece of my life that led me to this point. But like I said, it's something that I didn't really expect to share, nor did I really want to, gonna be honest. But I guess life has a different path for me, and I've been pushed to do it. So if anybody else has ever had a situation like this or an experience like this, I'd be interested to hear about it and maybe talk about it with you guys. As well, if you have any questions, I'm always open to answering anything. This has given me kind of a new perspective on life, and I really do love sharing it and talking to people and helping them as they awaken, because it seems to be things get triggered around me, and I enjoy talking about it. So if you guys ever want to speak about it or ask me any questions, please feel free. And yeah, I will explain the rest of everything else later. This is the first video.